No nanny lasted more than a month at the Sterling estate. They fled the oppressive silence, the chilling emptiness of the marble halls, and the profound, unsettling stillness of the boy, Leo. He was a ghost in his own home, a beautiful porcelain doll with vacant eyes, diagnosed with a rare and catastrophic regressive disorder following his mother's death. 7 nannies, all with impeccable credentials, had tried and failed to elicit so much as a flicker of recognition. They left defeated, whispering that the child was simply gone. Then a quiet housekeeper named Elara Vance showed up, not for the boy, but for the dust. She was different. She didn't try to force a reaction. She simply existed in his space, a calming presence moving with a gentle, rhythmic grace. She would clean his windows and speak to the glass, describing the clouds. She would polish the floor and tell the wood-grain stories of ancient forests. One afternoon, the boy's billionaire father, Alistair Sterling, a man hollowed out by grief and failure, came home early to find her sitting on the floor of Leo's room, not looking at his son, but at a small, worn wooden horse clutched in the boy's hand. She was whispering to the toy, and in that moment, Leo's fingers, which had been locked in a tight grip for 3 years, twitched. His head tilted a fraction of an inch toward her voice. It was a change so minuscule it was almost nothing, but for Alistair, who had stared at that same frozen tableau for 1,000 days, it was an earthquake that shattered his world and left him utterly, speechlessly frozen in place. That single impossible moment would change everything. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. The Sterling mansion was less a home than a mausoleum, a monument to a life that had abruptly ceased. Alistair Sterling moved through its cavernous rooms with the grim purpose of a man serving a sentence. Wealth had once been a tool for creation, for building empires and shaping skylines. Now it was merely insulation, a thick, soundproof wall against a world he no longer wished to engage with. It could buy him silence, privacy, and an endless parade of specialists who all delivered the same verdict with varying degrees of sympathetic polish. Leo was lost to them, locked inside a prison of his own mind from which there was no escape. The diagnosis had a long, clinical name, but Alistair heard only one word: permanent. It was a life sentence for them both. His wife, Serafina, was gone, taken in a senseless, violent crush of metal on a rain-slicked road. His son, who had been a vibrant, laughing toddler, had followed her into the void, his light extinguished just as suddenly, leaving behind only a shell. The silence in the house was Leo's silence. It was Alistair's grief. The two were indistinguishable. He managed his empire remotely from a vast, dark wood study, the door perpetually closed, a barrier as much against the hushed footsteps of his staff as it was against the ghost of his son down the hall. Elara Vance's arrival was an administrative detail, handled by Mrs. Gable, the stern, efficient head of staff. She was vetted, her references checked, her past a neat, tragic summary on a single page. A widow, quiet, diligent, seeking a live-in position. The line that noted the loss of her own young son was read with a flicker of pity by Mrs. Gable, and then filed away. To Alistair, she was just another uniform, a shadow meant to erase the daily signs of existence, dust, fingerprints, the slow decay of order. He wouldn't have been able to pick her out of a lineup. Elara, however, saw everything. She saw the film of dust on the grand piano that no one played. She saw the faint, child-sized handprint on a glass door leading to the gardens, an artifact from a happier time that previous housekeepers had dutifully erased. She saw the way the staff spoke in whispers, as if a normal tone might cause the fragile structure of their world to shatter. And she saw Leo. She was assigned the wing that included his suite of rooms, a task that had caused the last girl to quit in tears, unnerved by the boy's unnerving stillness. On her 3rd day, Elara entered his room. It was a beautiful space, filled with the finest toys that were never touched and books that were never read. It was a child's bedroom as imagined by a set designer, lacking any of the chaotic energy of actual childhood. Leo sat in a large, cushioned armchair by the window, placed there by his morning nurse. He was dressed impeccably in soft clothes, his blond hair neatly combed. He stared out at the manicured lawn, but his gaze was unfocused, his blue eyes like clouded glass. In his lap, his hands were fused around a small, simple wooden horse, its paint worn away by the constant, unyielding pressure of his grip. The nurse had explained the routine in a flat, dispassionate voice. Leo was unresponsive. He was fed through a tube. His medications were administered at precise intervals. He was, for all intents and purposes, an object to be maintained. But Ilara had lost a child. She knew that even in the deepest silence, a soul still flickered. She began her work, her movements slow and deliberate, so as not to startle him. She cleaned the vast windows, her cloth moving in soothing, circular motions. The silence pressed in on her, thick and heavy. It was the same silence that had filled her own small apartment after her son Daniel was gone. It was a silence that screamed. Without conscious thought, a sound escaped her lips. It was a hum, a low, simple melody from a half-forgotten lullaby Daniel had loved. It was a tune of heartache and memory, meant for no one but herself. She continued to hum as she worked her back to the boy. Then she felt it. A change in the room's atmosphere, a subtle shift in the quantum field of grief. She stopped, her hand frozen on the glass. Slowly she turned. Leo had not moved. He was still staring out the window, his posture unchanged. But she knew. She walked closer, her heart a soft, frantic drum against her ribs. She looked at his hands. The knuckles, usually white from the force of his grip on the wooden horse, seemed infinitesimally less tense, and his eyes, though still distant, were pointed not at the lawn, but slightly to the left, toward the spot where the sound had originated. It was a flicker, a ghost of a reaction, but it was there. The specialists were wrong. The nannies were wrong. The father, locked in his study, was wrong. Leo wasn't gone. He was listening. Ilara did not mention what she had seen. To voice it would be to invite scrutiny, dismissal, perhaps even termination. Mrs. Gable ran the house on the doctrine of Dr. Croft, the eminent neurologist who managed Leo's case. His word was law, and his law stated that Leo Sterling was beyond reach. To suggest otherwise was not just optimistic, it was a form of insubordination. So Ilara kept her discovery locked away, a secret seed of hope she tended in the quiet of her own mind. She replayed the moment 100 times, the hum, the shift in the room, the almost imperceptible relaxation of his fingers. It had been real. Her grief for her own son had taught her to read the language of silence, to find meaning in the smallest of signs. Daniel, in his final weeks, had communicated with the twitch of a finger, the flicker of an eyelid. She had learned to see the soul behind the failing body. She saw the same soul in Leo. Her work became a series of quiet experiments, a gentle, patient courtship, with a consciousness that had retreated deep within itself. She learned the rhythms of the house, the precise schedule of the nurses who came and went with professional detachment. She had a window of 2 hours every morning and 3 hours every afternoon when she and Leo were effectively alone, two silent occupants of a gilded cage. Her first test was sent. At the far end of the estate lay a sprawling glass solarium, neglected and overgrown since Serafina's passing. It had been her sanctuary. Now it was a riot of untamed life, jasmine and gardenias climbing the glass panes, their fragrance a heady ghost of the woman who had planted them. Ilara began spending her breaks there, methodically clearing away the dead leaves and tangled vines. It was a way of bringing order to chaos, of tending to life in a house dedicated to loss. One morning she plucked a single perfect gardenia blossom and tucked it into her apron pocket. Later, in Leo's room, as she dusted a bookshelf near his chair, she quietly placed the flower on the end table beside him. She didn't look at him, didn't draw attention to it. She simply continued her work, her senses on high alert. For a long time, there was nothing. Then she saw it. A slight flare of his nostrils, a deep, involuntary intake of breath. He had smelled it. His body had responded even if his mind, or what they perceived as his mind, had not. It was another crack in the wall, another signal from the boy inside. Her next experiment was sound. The humming had been the key, but she couldn't risk being overheard. Instead, she began to talk to him, her voice a low, continuous murmur that blended with the soft sounds of her cleaning. She narrated her actions. "Now I'm dusting this big, tall lamp. It looks like a silver tree, doesn't it? I wonder if it dreams of being in a forest." She spoke of the world outside the window. "Look, a little brown bird has landed on the branch. He's puffing up his chest. Maybe he's singing a song we can't hear." She never asked him questions, never demanded a response. It was not a conversation. It was an offering, a stream of gentle noise to fill the void. She was giving him a world made of words, a world he could inhabit without having to move a muscle. She started bringing her project from the solarium to him. She would wheel his chair into the warm, humid air of the glass house, parking him near a pot of fragrant rosemary or a blooming orchid. The change in environment was stark. The air in his room was sterile and recycled. Here it was rich and alive, thick with the smells of damp earth and living things. She would work quietly, repotting plants, her hands covered in soil. She'd talk to the plants and, by extension, to him. "You need a bit more room to grow, don't you, little fern?" she'd say, her voice soft. During these sessions, she paid close attention to his physical state. The nurse, a stern woman named Ingrid, would administer his mid-morning medication right before Elara's time with him began. Elara noticed a pattern. Before the dose, Leo's stillness seemed watchful. After, it became a heavy, drugged lethargy. His eyelids would droop, and the faint spark she sometimes imagined in his eyes would be completely extinguished. A cold knot of suspicion began to form in her stomach. What exactly was in that syringe? Dr. Croft's protocol was sacred, but Elara was beginning to see it not as a treatment, but as a suppression. She began a new ritual. She found a small, forgotten sketchbook and a pencil in a drawer in the solarium. While Leo sat in the warm green light, she started to draw. She was no artist, but she could render simple shapes. She drew the bird she saw outside the window. She drew the gardenia blossom. She drew the sun. And then she drew the little wooden horse he always held, giving it a flowing mane and a proud stance. She named the drawing Odyssey. She would leave the drawings on the table beside him. For days they remained untouched. She told herself it didn't matter, that the act of creating was enough. Then, one afternoon, after she had wheeled him back to his room, she returned to the solarium to clean up. The drawing of the horse was on the floor beside the table. It had a small, distinct crease down one corner, a crease that could only have been made by a small hand trying to grasp it. He had reached for it. He had tried to take it. The seed of hope in her chest blossomed into a fragile, terrifying flower. The solarium had become their secret world, a bubble of life suspended within the cold architecture of the mansion. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the sterile, filtered atmosphere of the main house. It was here, surrounded by the patient, silent growth of green things, that Elara felt the barrier around Leo was at its thinnest. She continued her ritual of drawing, of narrating the small, quiet world around them. She saw his reactions growing, though they remained microscopic to any but her hyper-observant eyes. A deeper breath when she brought a fragrant lemon leaf near him. A brief, focused stare at a brightly colored butterfly she sketched. Each one was a victory, a whisper from the boy trapped inside. Today she felt a different energy in the room, a kind of charged stillness. She had wheeled Leo next to a large terracotta pot where she was tending to a climbing vine. She took out her sketchbook and turned to a fresh page. She began to draw his wooden horse again, but this time she drew it with powerful legs, mid-gallop across the page. "This is Odyssey," she said softly, her voice the only sound besides the gentle drip of the irrigation system. "He's on a very important journey. He has to run very, very fast, through forests and over mountains." As she spoke, she began to tap a light, rhythmic beat on the side of the terracotta pot with her fingers, a simple clip-clop sound. Tap, tap-a-tap, tap, tap-a-tap. It was the rhythm of a cantering horse, a sound from a life of movement and freedom. She kept her eyes on the drawing, her focus absolute, pouring all her intention into the simple story. "He's galloping now, faster than the wind," she murmured. Tap, tap-a-tap. From the corner of her eye she saw his hand, the one not clutching the wooden horse, twitch on the armrest of his chair. She kept going, her heart starting to beat in time with the rhythm she was tapping. "He's brave, this horse. He's not afraid of the dark woods." Tap, tap-a-tap. And then it happened. A sound. It wasn't a word, not even a syllable. It was a small, guttural puff of air from deep in his chest. "Ah, Oige." The sound was so unexpected, so alien in the years-long silence of the boy that Alara's hand froze mid-tap. She stopped breathing. Had she imagined it? Slowly she lifted her gaze from the sketchbook and looked at Leo. His head, usually lolling slightly to one side, was lifted. It was only an inch, but it was an inch of his own volition. His clouded blue eyes were fixed, not on her face, but on her hand resting on the pot. He was looking at the source of the sound. Her own breath came out in a shaky gasp. She had to know. With a trembling hand, she began to tap again, the same simple rhythm. Tap, tap-a-tap. He did it again. Ha! This time it was louder, more defined. It was a sound of effort, of breath being pushed past vocal cords that had lain dormant for years. A sound of life, a sound of connection. Tears pricked Alara's eyes, hot and sudden. Joy, fierce and overwhelming, surged through her. It was the joy of a gardener seeing the first sprout push through frozen earth. He was in there. He was listening. He was processing. He was responding. This single explosive breath was proof that the intricate architecture of his mind was not demolished, merely shuttered. The diagnosis, the years of silent resignation, the pronouncements of the esteemed Dr. Croft, they were all wrong. But as the wave of elation crested, it was followed by an undertow of cold fear. What had she done? She had violated the most sacred rule of the Sterling household: do not disturb the boy. She had trespassed on the carefully managed pathology of Leo Sterling. This sound, this glorious, impossible sound, was evidence. It was a miracle, but it was also a crime in the eyes of the established order. She thought of Alistair Sterling, the formidable grieving man locked in his study. What would he do if he knew? Would he see the hope in it, or would he see a dangerous disruption, a cruel prodding of a wound that was meant to be left to scar over in peace? Her joy was now tangled with terror. She had found the key to the locked room, but opening the door could bring the whole house crashing down around them. She looked at Leo, whose head had sunk back to its usual position, the effort having exhausted him. But his eyes remained on her hand for a few seconds longer before drifting away. It was enough. She had to continue. Whatever the risk, she could not, would not, turn her back on the boy who had just, for the first time in 3 years, made a sound. Alistair Sterling ran on a fuel of grief and routine. His days were partitioned into blocks of time dedicated to acquisitions, market analysis, and shareholder meetings, a relentless forward march of commerce that was the only thing capable of drowning out the backward pull of memory. He rarely saw his son. Seeing Leo was like looking at a portrait of his own failure. The boy's stillness was a reflection of his own emotional paralysis. He had outsourced his son's care, his own fatherhood, to a team of professionals led by Dr. Croft, a man who spoke in soothing, authoritative tones about management and acceptance. Alistair had accepted. He had paid the bills, signed the forms, and retreated into the one realm where he still felt competent, his work. The house was a place to sleep, not to live, but today the rhythm was broken. A transatlantic video conference had been abruptly canceled due to a technical failure in the London office. He found himself with 3 unscheduled hours in the middle of the afternoon, a void in his meticulously structured day. He left his study, restless, and wandered the silent halls. A faint, unfamiliar sound drew him down the west corridor. It was a rhythmic tapping, soft and persistent. It sounded almost playful. The sound was coming from the solarium, his late wife's favorite place, a part of the house he had avoided for 3 years. Curiosity, an emotion he hadn't felt in a long time, warred with the instinct to retreat. He pushed open the heavy glass door. The scene before him stopped his heart. The air was warm and green, a riot of life. In the center of it all sat the new housekeeper, Ilara, on the floor, a sketchbook in her lap, and in his wheelchair facing her was Leo. But it was not the Leo he was used to seeing. The boy's head was up, his eyes were focused, and from his mouth came a sound, a guttural, effortful ha, in time with the woman's tapping on a clay pot. His son's hand, the one that was not welded to the wooden horse, was twitching on the armrest, the fingers opening and closing, as if trying to mimic the rhythm. Alistair froze in the doorway, the world tilting on its axis. For 1,000 days he had seen nothing, no movement, no sound, no light in his son's eyes. Now this stranger, this housekeeper, had conjured life from the void. His first gut reaction was a surge of pure white-hot rage. It was an irrational, protective fury. Who was she to do this? To interfere? Dr. Croft's warnings echoed in his mind. Overstimulation can be detrimental. We must maintain a calm, predictable environment. False hope is the cruelest thing of all. This woman was breaking every rule. She was threatening the fragile, tragic peace he had so carefully constructed. "What do you think you're doing?" The words came out like stones, hard and cold. Ilara jumped, startled, her hand flying to her chest. The sketchbook slid to the floor. She scrambled to her feet, her face pale with fear. Leo, the connection broken, immediately slumped back into his usual stillness, the light in his eyes vanishing as if a switch had been flipped. The sight of that regression, that immediate return to the void, lanced through Alistair's anger, leaving a raw wound of confusion and pain. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry, I was just—" Ilara stammered, her eyes wide. "You were just what?" he snarled, advancing into the room. "Violating the explicit instructions of his doctor? Performing some kind of experiment on my son?" He hated the way his voice sounded, the cruelty in it, but he couldn't stop it. His entire world had been upended in 30 seconds, and lashing out was his only defense. Ilara flinched, but did not look away. Her fear was evident, but beneath it was a bedrock of something else, something resolute. She took a deep breath. "I was communicating with him," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "He was responding." "Responding?" Alistair laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "He's not capable of responding. You were agitating him." "No," she insisted, shaking her head. "Please, just watch." Terror warred with conviction on her face. She was risking everything. She knelt down again, her movements slow, deliberate. She picked up the pot, and looking at Leo, she began to tap the rhythm again. Tap, tappa, tap. For a moment nothing happened. Alistair's heart sank, a bitter "I told you so" forming on his lips. And then it happened again. Leo's head lifted. His eyes found her hand. "Ha!" he breathed out, the sound a fragile miracle in the tense silence. Ilara looked up at Alistair, her expression not triumphant, but pleading. pleading for him to see what she saw. Alistair stared at his son, truly stared at him, for the first time in years. He saw the effort, the strain of a mind fighting its way through a thick fog to make a connection. He saw the spark. It was undeniable. The rage drained out of him, replaced by a dizzying, terrifying wave of an emotion he had long since buried. Hope. It felt like a shard of glass in his chest. He sank onto a nearby bench, his legs suddenly weak. "How?" he whispered, the single word encompassing a universe of questions. A tentative secret alliance was born in that moment. In the warm, green air of the solarium, an alliance forged against the established medical doctrine and years of despair. He looked at Alara, the quiet housekeeper he'd never noticed before, and saw her for the first time. "Continue," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Show me everything, but do not tell Dr. Croft. Not a word to anyone. Not yet." The dynamic in the Sterling mansion shifted overnight. Outwardly, nothing changed. Alara was still the housekeeper. Alistair was still the reclusive billionaire. But beneath the surface, a silent conspiracy was taking root. The solarium became their clandestine headquarters, the study a place for hushed, late-night debriefings. Alistair began to rearrange his schedule, canceling meetings and delegating tasks with a ruthlessness that baffled his board of directors. He started spending hours in the solarium, not participating, but watching from a discreet distance. He observed Alara's methods, her infinite patience, the way she never pushed Leo, but simply created invitations for him to engage with the world. He watched her sketch a bee and saw Leo's eyes follow a real bee buzzing against the glass pane. He heard her describe the taste of a raspberry and saw Leo's mouth make a faint chewing motion. Each tiny milestone was a tremor that further destabilized the foundations of his grief-stricken acceptance. He was witnessing a slow, painstaking resurrection, and it was being performed by a woman whose name he barely knew. He found himself watching her as much as he watched his son. He saw the deep well of sadness in her eyes, a reflection of his own. He noticed the way she would sometimes touch a leaf or a flower with a tenderness that spoke of a profound connection to living things. One evening, as they reviewed security footage of the day's session, Alistair's way of gathering objective evidence, he paused the video. "You're good with him," he stated, the words feeling inadequate. "You understand him in a way no one else has." Alara looked at the frozen image of herself and Leo on the screen. "I had a son," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "His name was Daniel. He was sick for a long time before he left. The world got very small for him at the end. We learned to talk without words." It was the first piece of her past she had offered him, a key to understanding the source of her intuition. Alistair didn't press for details. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of their shared membership in the cruelest of clubs. The knowledge deepened his respect for her and sharpened the focus of their shared mission. He wasn't just fighting for Leo anymore. He was honoring the memory of another lost boy. As Leo's responsiveness grew, so did their questions. The official narrative from Dr. Croft, a sudden, irreversible neurological event, was crumbling before their eyes. "Something doesn't add up," Alistair said one night, pacing his study. "Leo was fine, absolutely fine, until after the accident. Serafina, she never mentioned any concerns. Were there other doctors?" Alara asked gently. "Before Dr. Croft took over completely?" Alistair shook his head. "Croft was the family physician for years. He was a friend. After Serafina died, I leaned on him. He handled everything. I wasn't in any state to question him." The guilt in his voice was a raw, open wound. Alara saw the immense weight he carried. "Maybe your wife left something," she suggested. "Papers, journals. A mother would notice things. She would have written them down." The idea struck Alistair with the force of a physical blow. Serafina's study. He had locked it the day after the funeral and never returned. It was a perfect dust-free shrine to his pain, a room he couldn't bear to enter. Now it might hold the answers they needed. With a shared, nervous breath, he led Ilara to the sealed door. The air inside was stale, thick with the faint scent of Serafina's perfume. Books, sketches, and notes lay on her desk exactly as she had left them. It was a room frozen in time. While Alistair stood paralyzed by the ghost of his wife's presence, Ilara began a careful, respectful search. She looked through medical files, invoices, and calendars. It was in a leather-bound day planner that she found the first clue: an appointment with a Dr. Eris Thorne, a pediatric specialist at City General Hospital, dated 3 weeks before Serafina's death. Dr. Carr. Croft's name was nowhere near the entry. Alistair's heart pounded. He had no memory of this. Serafina had sought a second opinion without telling him. Why? Driven by a new urgency, he searched his wife's desk, his hands shaking. Tucked inside a large volume of poetry, he found it, Serafina's personal journal. He opened it with trembling fingers. Her elegant script filled the pages, detailing her life, her love for him, her joy in Leo, and then her worries. She wrote about Dr. Croft's increasingly dismissive attitude, his readiness to prescribe medication for what she felt was normal toddler behavior. He says Leo is overly anxious, one entry read. He suggests a mild sedative to even him out. A sedative for a 2-year-old? It feels wrong, Alistair. I feel like he isn't listening to me. The words were a knife in his gut. She had tried to tell him, but he had been too busy, too consumed with his work. He flipped forward, his breath catching in his throat. And then he found the entry he was looking for, dated the day after her appointment with Dr. Thorne. Such a relief. Dr. Thorne was wonderful. He spent over an hour with Leo. He says our boy is perfect, bright, sensitive, and completely healthy. He called Croft's suggestions borderline malpractice. I have his full report. I need to show it to Alistair tonight. We need to get rid of Croft. I don't trust him around our son. She never got the chance. She died that evening on her way home from the office, and tucked into the back sleeve of the journal was a folded document, the key artifact, Dr. Thorne's report. Alistair unfolded it, his eyes scanning the clinical text that described a vibrant, intelligent, thriving little boy. It was a letter from a lost world, a testament to the son he had forgotten, and an indictment of the man he had trusted with his child's life. The world swam before Alistair's eyes. The crisp official report in his hands felt heavier than a tombstone. It was a ghost, a testament to what should have been. Dr. Thorne's assessment was unequivocal. Leo Sterling was a neurologically typical, highly intelligent toddler. The contrast between that clinical description and the catatonic child sitting in the room down the hall was a chasm that could only have been created by a deliberate, malicious act. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying speed. Serafina's sudden death, his own debilitating grief, Dr. Croft, the trusted family friend, stepping into the void, offering solace and taking control. He had used Alistair's trauma as a weapon, as a smokescreen to enact a monstrous plan. He did this, Alistair whispered, the words tasting like ash. All of it. Croft did this to him. Ilara placed a steadying hand on his arm. Her presence was a small anchor in the storm of his rage and guilt. The medication, she said, her voice low and certain. That has to be it. What is he giving him? They retreated to Alistair's study, the door locked, the report and the journal spread across the mahogany desk like evidence at a crime scene. Alistair pulled up Leo's current medical chart on his encrypted computer. A cocktail of powerful drugs was listed, administered daily by Nurse Ingrid under Croft's standing orders. There were 2 heavy-duty sedatives and an antipsychotic, drugs typically reserved for the most severe adult psychiatric conditions. Alistair, A man whose fortune was built on data analysis and ruthless investigation turned his formidable skills away from the stock market and onto the pharmaceutical industry. Within minutes, he was deep in medical journals and clinical trial results. The side effects of long-term high-dose administration of this specific combination of drugs in children were terrifying. They included motor skill degradation, cognitive impairment, emotional blunting, and induced catatonia. The symptoms listed were a perfect match for Leo's condition. Croft hadn't been treating a disorder. He had been creating one molecule by molecule, day by day. He had systematically poisoned a healthy child, transforming him into a living mannequin to perpetuate a lie. But why? The motive, Alistair knew, would be as ugly and profane as the act itself. He made a call, not to the police, but to the head of his firm's forensic accounting division, a man renowned for his ability to find financial skeletons in the most heavily guarded closets. He gave him one name, Dr. Martin Croft. "I want to know everything," Alistair commanded, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Every dollar he's ever earned, every company he's invested in, every shell corporation, every offshore account. Tear his financial life apart. I want to know where the money is coming from." The results came back in less than 12 hours. It was a masterpiece of greed. Dr. Croft held a massive secret portfolio of stock in the very pharmaceutical company that manufactured the drugs he was pumping into Leo. The value of his shares had tripled in the past 2 years. But that was only the beginning. The true masterstroke was discovered in the financial records of the Sterling Family Foundation, the charitable arm of Alistair's empire. For the past 3 years, the foundation had been making a quarterly donation of $2 million to something called the Croft Institute for Neurological Advancement. It was an automatic payment authorized by Alistair in the fog of his grief and then forgotten. The forensic accountants confirmed the Institute was nothing more than a shell corporation, a front for Croft's extravagant lifestyle, a yacht, a villa in Tuscany, a collection of vintage cars. He was siphoning off the Sterling fortune, using the chemically induced illness of their son as his own personal ATM. The full picture was now hideously clear. Croft knew Serafina was going to fire him. Her death was a tragic, random event that he had twisted into a golden opportunity. He had preyed on a grieving father's vulnerability, isolating him, validating his despair, and creating a patient who would require expensive, lifelong care, all funded by the very family he was destroying. The betrayal was absolute, a violation so profound that Alistair felt a cold, calm clarity descend upon him. The grief and guilt that had paralyzed him for years were burned away, replaced by a singular, icy purpose. He would not just expose Croft, he would obliterate him. He looked at Alara, who had been watching him, her face a mixture of horror and grim validation. "We have him," Alistair said, the words like chips of ice. "Now we just have to decide how to proceed." Alara looked toward the hall in the direction of Leo's room. "We have to be careful," she warned. "For Leo. We can't just stop the medication. It could be dangerous, and Croft, a man like that, will be dangerous too if he feels cornered." She was right. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about a rescue mission. Alistair, guided by Alara's caution, reined in his impulse for immediate explosive confrontation. This had to be handled like a delicate extraction, not a demolition. The first step was to get Leo out from under Croft's medical authority without raising his suspicion. Alistair made a call to Dr. Eris Thorne, the man Serafina had trusted. He explained the situation in stark, clipped terms, emailing him the journal entries and the original report. Dr. Thorne, now the head of pediatrics at City General, was horrified. He remembered Serafina and the bright little boy. He immediately agreed to help, assembling a small, trusted team for a clandestine in-home assessment. They would come to the mansion under the guise of being art appraisers, a believable cover for a man like Alistair. The plan was set for 2 days' time. They were so close. But a cornered animal is at its most vicious, and they had underestimated the tendrils of loyalty and fear that Dr. Croft had woven throughout the Sterling household. Nurse Ingrid, the stern woman who administered Leo's medication, had worked for Croft for over a decade. She noticed the changes: Mr. Sterling's sudden, intense interest in his son, the housekeeper spending hours in the solarium with the boy, the locked doors and hushed conversations. Her loyalty to Croft was absolute, born of financial dependence and professional deference. She made a call. The retaliation was swift, surgical, and diabolical. Before Dr. Thorne's team could even be dispatched, the attack came from a direction they never anticipated. The doorbell chimed, a sound that was usually filtered through layers of staff. This time, Mrs. Gable appeared at the study door, her face ashen. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice trembling, "it's Child Protective Services. They have a court order." Alistair and Alara exchanged a look of pure shock. Two stern-faced social workers, accompanied by 2 police officers, stood in the grand foyer. The lead agent, a woman with tired eyes, explained the situation with bureaucratic detachment. They had received an anonymous, detailed tip. The allegations were sickeningly precise. A vulnerable, disabled child was being subjected to unauthorized and potentially harmful therapies by an unqualified domestic employee, Alara Vance. The report claimed she was withholding prescribed medication and causing the child severe emotional distress, all under the negligent watch of a reclusive and unstable father. It was Croft's masterpiece of a smear campaign, twisting every one of Alara's gentle breakthroughs into an act of abuse. The court order was ironclad. Pending a full investigation, Alara was to have no further contact with Leo. She was to vacate the premises immediately. Alistair's protests, his attempts to explain, were met with impassive stares. To them, he was just another rich, powerful man trying to bend the rules. Alara stood in stunned silence, the blood draining from her face. They were taking her away from Leo. They were severing the connection she had so painstakingly nurtured. A social worker escorted her to her room to pack a small bag. Alistair watched, helpless, as his lawyers, summoned by frantic phone call, argued fruitlessly in the foyer. The most devastating moment came when they made Alara walk past Leo's open doorway to leave. Leo was in his chair, Nurse Ingrid standing beside him like a sentinel. He saw Alara, flanked by strangers. His progress, his slow awakening, was still fragile. He didn't understand what was happening, only that his source of light and comfort was being taken away. His face, which had begun to show flickers of expression, crumpled. A low, keening sound escaped his lips, a sound of pure anguish. Then, as Alara was led out the front door, he went utterly silent and still. The spark was gone. The fog rolled back in, thicker and more suffocating than ever. He retreated back into the void, and Alistair, watching his son break all over again, felt a rage so pure and cold it threatened to consume him whole. The war had begun. The silence that descended upon the mansion after Alara's departure was a malevolent thing, far heavier and more complete than the silence of grief that had preceded it. It was the silence of a tomb resealed. Alistair stood in the center of the grand foyer, the front door closed, the echo of the social worker's pronouncements still hanging in the air. He looked down the hall toward Leo's room and saw his son, slumped in his chair, his eyes utterly vacant. The fragile progress of weeks had been annihilated in minutes. The sight shattered the last vestiges of the detached businessman. The cold, calculating fury of a moment before coalesced into something primal, the ferocious, unyielding resolve of a father. His grief had been a passive, suffocating fog. This new rage was an active, incandescent flame. He had allowed this to happen. His negligence, his willful blindness, had given Croft the time and space to entrench himself, to poison his son, to corrupt his household, and now to orchestrate this vile attack. That ended now. He turned to Mrs. Gable, his voice low and dangerous. "Get Nurse Ingrid out of my house. Tell her she has 5 minutes to collect her things. If she is not gone by then, I will have her removed for trespassing." He then pointed to 2 of his personal security staff. "Escort her off the property. Ensure she takes nothing that belongs to us. She is never to set foot here again." His transformation was so absolute that the staff, who were used to a remote and disengaged employer, stared at him in stunned silence before scurrying to obey. Alistair strode into his study, not as a retreat, but as a war room. He made a series of calls, his voice a weapon. His first call was to Alara, who was being settled into a suite at a 5-star hotel by his personal assistant. "I am so sorry, Alara," he said, the words raw. "This is my fault, but I promise you I will fix this. I will bring you home, and we will destroy him." He heard her quiet, choked sob on the other end, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Just take care of Leo," she whispered. His next call was to the head of his legal team, a shark named Marcus Thorne, no relation to the doctor, who had handled his most ruthless corporate takeovers. "Marcus," Alistair said, "change of plans. This is no longer a delicate extraction. This is a scorched earth campaign. I want Dr. Martin Croft ruined. I want his license revoked, his assets frozen, and I want him in a prison cell. Use every resource we have. Spare no expense." He then called Dr. Eris Thorne. "The assessment is off, but the mission is more critical than ever. Croft has made his move. I need your testimony. I need you to be the medical expert who burns him to the ground." Dr. Thorne, outraged by the news, pledged his full cooperation. The battle was fought on 2 fronts. The first was the public, vicious assault from CPS. Alistair's legal team descended upon the agency, burying them in affidavits, motions, and requests for evidence. They submitted the security footage from the solarium, a silent, powerful testament to Alara's gentle methods. They contrasted it with footage of Nurse Ingrid's cold, perfunctory administrations, highlighting the stark difference between care and procedure. They deposed every member of the household staff. The second front was the covert, devastating attack on Croft himself. While Marcus's legal team prepared the civil and criminal cases, Alistair's forensic accountants delivered the final damning piece of evidence. A clear money trail linking Croft's pharmaceutical investments directly to a series of offshore accounts that coincided perfectly with the Sterling Foundation's donations. It was irrefutable proof of fraud, money laundering, and a host of other felonies. Alara, though physically removed from the battle, was a crucial part of the strategy. From her hotel suite, she wrote a detailed day-by-day account of her time with Leo. She chronicled every small observation, every flicker of response, every sound, every scent, every drawing. Her notes were not clinical. They were intimate, empathetic, and deeply moving. They painted a picture of a boy slowly, painstakingly, being coaxed back to life. Her written testimony, combined with the video evidence, was a powerful counter-narrative to Croft's lies. Alistair visited her every evening. They would sit together, 2 co-conspirators, planning the next day's strategy. In these quiet moments, the lines between employer and employee, between grieving father and empathetic housekeeper, blurred and vanished. They were partners, united by their shared love for a little boy and their shared determination to see justice done. He saw the toll the separation was taking on her. Her quiet strength was still there, but her eyes were haunted by the image of Leo's crumpled face. "We're close," he would reassure her, his hand covering hers. "He won't get away with this." The fight for Leo had become a fight for her, too. It was a fight to restore her name, to validate her intuition, and to bring her back to the family she had unknowingly started to build. The endgame came faster and more decisively than anyone expected. Alistair's legal and financial assault had created the perfect storm. Armed with the forensic accounting report, Dr. Thorne's expert medical opinion, Serafina's journal, and Ilara's powerful testimony, the district attorney's office saw the case for what it was, a high-profile slam-dunk prosecution of a monster hiding in plain sight. They moved with startling speed. The confrontation was not a dramatic scene in a courtroom, but a quiet, efficient dismantling of a man's life. Warrants were issued. On a Tuesday morning, simultaneous raids were conducted on Dr. Croft's prestigious clinic, his lavish home, and the Croft Institute, which turned out to be little more than a mailbox and a server in a rented office space. Investigators seized computers, files, and financial records, the evidence piling up into an insurmountable mountain. Dr. Croft was arrested at his clinic in front of his staff and wealthy patients, the moment captured by a news crew that had received a timely anonymous tip. The image of the esteemed doctor being led away in handcuffs was the lead story on the evening news. The narrative was expertly shaped by Alistair's PR team. Heroic billionaire father uncovers medical horror story, saves son from predatory doctor. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Croft. The state medical board summarily suspended his license. The IRS launched a massive tax fraud investigation. Former patients began to come forward with their own stories of over-medication and questionable billing practices. His empire of deceit crumbled in less than 48 hours. With Croft's arrest and the mountain of evidence Alistair's team provided, the CPS case against Ilara evaporated. The agency, facing the threat of a massive lawsuit for their negligence and the public humiliation of having been a pawn in Croft's scheme, dropped the case entirely. An embarrassed supervisor called Alistair personally to offer a profuse, fumbling apology. The emergency removal order was rescinded. Ilara was cleared of all wrongdoing. Her name was not just cleared, it was sanctified in the press. She was the quiet housekeeper whose intuition saved a little boy. A Mary Poppins for the modern age. Alistair didn't call her with the news. He went to the hotel himself. He found her standing by the window, looking out over the city, her bag already packed. She had known somehow that it was over. He didn't say anything at first. He just walked over and stood beside her. The silence between them was no longer one of grief or strategy, but of profound, shared relief. "It's done," he said softly. "He's finished." He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "I am so sorry, Ilara. For everything, for not seeing what was right in front of me, for letting him hurt my son, for what they put you through." "It wasn't your fault," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You were grieving." "It's not an excuse," Dundee countered, "but I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to him and to you." He reached out and took her hand. "Come home, Ilara. Leo needs you." He paused, his grip tightening slightly. "We need you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, a real luminous smile that transformed her face. She nodded. The drive back to the mansion was quiet. When they pulled up the long driveway, the entire household staff was lined up on the front steps, led by a humbled Mrs. Gable. As Ilara stepped out of the car, they burst into applause. It was a spontaneous, heartfelt welcome that brought a flush to Ilara's cheeks. But she barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on the open doorway. She walked inside, her footsteps echoing in the foyer, no longer a humble employee, but the undisputed heart of the home. She went straight to Leo's room. He was in his chair, exactly where she had last seen him. He was awake but listless, his gaze fixed on nothing. The new nurse, a kind woman hand-picked by Dr. Thorne, stood respectfully in the corner. Ilara knelt before him, her heart aching at his regression. She reached out and gently took his small, limp hand. "Leo," she said, her voice soft and clear. "I'm back." There was no response. His eyes remained empty. Alistair watched from the doorway, his own heart breaking. Had they been too late? Had the trauma of the separation sealed the door for good? Elara did not falter. She leaned closer, bringing her face into his line of sight. She thought of their secret world in the solarium, of their shared stories. She whispered the name of their brave little hero. "Odyssey," she said. "Odyssey has come home." At the sound of the name, a flicker, a barely perceptible twitch of his eyelids. His gaze shifted, slowly, uncertainly, until it found her face. For the first time in days, he truly saw her. His breath hitched. His small face, a mask of apathy moments before, began to tremble. A single perfect tear welled in his eye and traced a path down his pale cheek. Then, with an effort that seemed to take all the strength in his small body, he lifted his free hand. It trembled violently as he reached out, not for the wooden horse still clutched in his other hand, but for her. His fingers brushed against her cheek, and then he spoke. His first word in 3 years, whispered past unused vocal cords, a sound of pure, desperate recognition. "Ella." Alistair leaned against the doorframe, a choked sob escaping his lips, as he witnessed the miracle he had almost allowed to be stolen from him forever. His son was back. 2 years later, the Stirling mansion was unrecognizable. The oppressive silence had been replaced by the echoes of laughter, the pitter-patter of a child's running feet, and the bright, cheerful melodies of cartoons drifting from the living room. Sunlight, once held at bay by heavy drapes, now streamed through spotless windows, illuminating rooms filled with vibrant color and life. The house was no longer a mausoleum, it was a home. The solarium, once a secret sanctuary, was now the center of their family life, a lush green paradise where they spent most of their time. Leo, now a bright and energetic 5-year-old, was a testament to the power of patient love and proper care. Under the guidance of Dr. Thorne and a team of dedicated therapists, he had made astonishing progress. The years of chemical imprisonment had left their mark. He had developmental delays to overcome and emotional scars that still surfaced in moments of anxiety. But his spirit, once so deeply buried, was indomitable. He was talkative, curious, and endlessly creative. His constant companion was no longer the small wooden horse, which now sat on a place of honor on his bookshelf, but a sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. He filled pages with vibrant drawings of galloping horses, soaring birds, and his family, a tall, smiling man, a kind-faced woman, and a small boy holding both their hands. Dr. Croft was serving a lengthy prison sentence for fraud, malpractice, and a litany of other charges. His name had become a cautionary tale in the medical community. In his wake, Alistair had established the Serafina and Daniel Foundation for Patient Advocacy, a powerfully funded organization dedicated to protecting children from medical malpractice and supporting families in their fight for justice. Elara Vance, no longer a housekeeper, sat on the board as its executive director. Her quiet strength and unwavering moral clarity had become the foundation's guiding principles. She was a formidable advocate, her own story a powerful weapon against the arrogance and greed she now fought on a national scale. Alistair had found a new purpose. He had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of his global empire, delegating to trusted successors. His focus was now on the foundation and, above all, on his son. He had become the father he was always meant to be, present, engaged, and infinitely patient. The cold, grieving recluse was gone, replaced by a man whose wealth was now measured not in stock prices, but in bedtime stories and shared laughter. His relationship with Elara had evolved naturally, quietly, into a deep and loving partnership. They were a family forged in crisis and bound by a love that had healed them all. The culmination of their journey came on a warm autumn evening at the Foundation's inaugural charity gala. The grand ballroom was filled with philanthropists, doctors, and journalists, all there to support the cause. Alistair stood at the podium, a man transformed. He spoke not of balance sheets or corporate strategy, but of the fragility of trust and the resilience of the human heart. We often measure wealth in terms of assets, of what we can acquire and control, he said, his voice steady and clear. But I have learned that true wealth lies in what we cannot own, in what can only be earned: trust, hope, and a second chance. His eyes scanned the crowd and found Ilara. She was standing near the stage with Leo, who was dressed in a tiny tuxedo, looking up at his father with wide, adoring eyes. Ilara's gaze met Alistair's, and in that silent exchange, the entirety of their shared history passed between them. The pain, the fear, the fight, and the ultimate triumph. I stand here tonight because of a quiet hero, Alistair continued, his voice thick with emotion. Someone who had the courage to listen to the silence, to see the boy everyone else had given up on. She taught me that the most profound truths are often spoken in the softest voices, and that the greatest strength is found in the gentlest touch. He raised his glass. This foundation is dedicated to them, to the quiet heroes and the silent children waiting for someone to hear them. Warb. As the room erupted in applause, Leo tugged on Ilara's hand, a huge smile on his face. They had come home. They had all in their own way come home. True family is not always the one we are born into, but the one we have the courage to build in the wreckage of our lives. A testament to the simple, unshakable truth that love is the most powerful medicine of all. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that.